What if the true engine of history was never gold or empires but taste? For centuries, the ultimate prize wasn't found in a mine, it grew on a vine. A few dried berries, a sliver of bark, a bead of sap, these could raise up kingdoms or break them. Today we see them as mere seasonings. But once, a sack of peppercorns outweighed a sack of gold coins. A jar of nutmeg could purchase an estate. A stick of cinnamon could clear a king's ransom. Entire civilizations were willing to sail off the map, to conquer and die, just to own the source of these scents. Welcome to Rich Root Official, where the hidden forces of history are revealed. Long before banks and stock tickers, before oil rigs and silicon chips, the world's economy pulsed to the rhythm of spices, not only for flavor, but for function. They kept meat from spoiling, cleaned injuries, hid rot, treated disease, and most of all, broadcasted rank. In the Middle Ages, a dish fragrant with clove or cardamom wasn't just a meal, it was proof you transcended the daily struggle to survive. In a world of want, spices were pure alchemy. And thus they transformed into currency, into influence. Think of Europe in the 12th century, bleak, remote, and monotonous. Most souls spent their entire lives within a few miles of their birth. Food was repetitive, winters were endless, fresh provisions were scarce. Preserved fare tasted of damp earth and salt. Yet, in castle halls, lords dined on flavors from mythical lands carried by merchants across trackless deserts, impassable peaks, and stormy seas. A single pound of pepper could barter for a horse. A tiny vial of saffron could be swapped for armor. These were not simple pleasures, they were stores of wealth. And Europe's hunger for them was insatiable. But feeding that hunger meant mastering the most complex, clandestine, and profitable pipeline ever devised. Spices didn't sprout in European soil. They hailed from the very rim of the known earth, the coasts of India, the scattered isles of Indonesia, the highlands of Ceylon, the rainforests of Asia. To arrive in Europe, they undertook a perilous relay, from Indian handlers to Arab brokers, from Arab brokers to ports in Alexandria, from there to the ships of Venice. Every exchange added a premium. Every participant hoarded their knowledge. The greater the distance, the taller the tales woven to obscure the truth. Was cinnamon plucked from nests of gigantic birds? Did nutmeg sprout where sea serpents slept? Was pepper harvested from jungles so terrifying they had to be burned? These myths were not folklore. They were proprietary intelligence primitive campaigns of market control. And at the terminus of this worldwide web waited Venice, the unlikely banker of the medieval age. Venice cultivated no spices. It owned no plantations. What it mastered was the pinch point, the narrow gate where all treasure flowed into Europe. By the 13th century, Venice commanded a stranglehold on the pepper trade. Its traders were the original market manipulators, stockpiling inventory in dockside warehouses, fabricating shortages, and timing their sales to peak avarice. The riches from this commerce built a city of water and wonder of opulent palaces, domed churches, and a navy without rival. Here was the first European power to grow wealthy, not from territory, but from transit from commanding channels of exchange, not acres of soil. A blueprint that modern enterprises still trace. But every monopoly plants the seed of its own undoing. The stronger Venice's hold, the more feverishly Europe schemed to escape it. And so, the narrative pivots to the west toward the vast Atlantic, toward terra incognita, toward the shores that would be named the Americas. Not for a thirst for knowledge. Not for romantic adventure. Europe pointed its prows westward for a single calculated purpose: to crush the spice cartel. Columbus did not brave the ocean to find a new continent. He sailed west because his charts promised a faster route to the Indies, the realm of pepper. He was mistaken, but his blunder redrew the globe. Vasco da Gama rounded the Cape not for discovery, but to dismantle the Arab network. Magellan's fleet circled the planet because Spain demanded an independent path to the Moluccas. Every expedition of the so-called Age of Discovery was, in essence, a high-stakes financial raid for affordable spices. Conquest trailed profit. Cartography followed commerce. And when European sails finally touched the Americas, they unlocked a second, unforeseen spice revolution novel, powerful, world-changing. The chili pepper, absent from all of Asia before 1492, raced across the Eastern Hemisphere at breathtaking speed. In mere generations, the cuisines of India, China, and Korea were reinvented. Vanilla, a gift from Mesoamerican forests, became a sensation among European aristocracy. Cacao, once a form of money in Aztec trade, was transformed into a regal beverage. Allspice native solely to the Caribbean basin became a coveted medicine and preservative. Overnight, the New World ceased to be a sideshow. It became an economic dynamo, a fresh frontier of flavor. This collision meant something monumental for our shared story. The Americas, separate for eons, were now irrevocably woven into the fabric of global exchange. This fusion of hemispheres marks the authentic birth of an interconnected world. To comprehend the shock of American spices, we must first examine the ancient system they shattered. Before chilies ignited Asia and vanilla seduced Europe, the planet's economy was driven by one colossal apparatus: the medieval spice road. A ruthlessly efficient pipeline where growers earned a pittance, merchants amassed kingdoms, and Venice erected an empire without tilling a single field. This was the Leviathan the Americas would confront and ultimately overturn. The medieval spice route was more than a series of trades, it was history's first fully globalized supply chain. Each link was optimized for profit, secrecy, and control. From the Indian shores to the Arabian Sea to the Venetian quays, spices changed hands countless times. But the hands were not treated equally. At the origin, a farmer might receive a coin. By the time that same peppercorn adorned a royal plate in France or England, its value had soared 100-fold. It stands as one of our earliest and most stark lessons in extracted value. And the architects of this system grasped a fundamental truth: power resides not in expanse but in constriction. Command a narrow waterway, a critical harbor, or a mountain pass, and you command the river of riches. Arab traders ruled the Indian Ocean by harnessing the seasonal monsoons and controlling the ports of Aden and Hormuz. Venice dominated Europe by locking down the Adriatic and striking exclusive pacts with the Mamluks of Egypt. Venice's size was irrelevant. Its position at the funnel's mouth was everything. This elegant system flourished until the pressure became too great. For like all monopolies, it incentivized a workaround. The more Venice inflated costs, the more desperately Europe sought to rupture the pipeline. And in the 1400s, that desperation ignited a fire. Portugal took the first leap. Its royalty cared little for fame or learning, they craved pepper. Pepper was the planet's most trafficked spice, the cornerstone of European cooking, and the premier profit generator of the medieval marketplace. If Portugal could bypass Venice, if it could forge a direct line to the source, it could recalibrate global might. But could a small kingdom on Europe's edge truly rewrite the rules? Vasco da Gama's voyage around Africa was a feat of engineering masquerading as seamanship. No European had successfully navigated the Indian Ocean. But in 1498, da Gama's ships dropped anchor at Calicut, the nerve center of the spice trade. What he witnessed was enraging. The spices shrouded in legend and danger were piled high in open markets, sold for a pittance, traded with casual ease. Indian merchants had been dealing in pepper for ages. Only Europe suffered under a grand illusion of rarity. Portugal's reaction was not admiration. It was aggression. Within years, Portuguese caravels blockaded harbors, seized vessels, and levied draconian tariffs. Their aim wasn't partnership, it was dominion. They constructed forts along the African, Arabian, and Indian coasts. They captured strategic narrows like Malacca. They shelled cities that defied them. They remade the Indian Ocean into an armed bazaar where every sail required Portuguese approval. Yet Portugal's reach exceeded its grasp. Its empire was too slender to maintain such control. And from the foggy north emerged a rival with colder calculus, deeper pockets, and relentless drive: the Dutch. The Dutch Republic in the 1600s was a compact nation with a colossal dream to become the nexus of world trade, and spices were the ticket. But the Dutch method was distinct. They didn't merely want to capture ports. They sought to systematize dominance. In 1602, they birthed an entity the world had never witnessed, the Verenigd Oostindische Company, or VOC, the Dutch East India Company. The VOC was not a state. It was not a merchant guild. It was a corporation. A firm with shareholders, profits, legal personhood, and decisively the right to wage war. It could negotiate treaties, erect fortifications, issue currency, administer justice, and rule colonies. It was the original multinational conglomerate with the authority of a nation. And it prospered by adhering to one brutal principle: own it all. The VOC set its sights on the Banda Islands, the sole natural habitat of the nutmeg tree. Nutmeg ranked among Europe's most desired spices. hailed as a cure for pestilence, digestive woes, and sleeplessness. Controlling nutmeg meant controlling a historical treasure of immense margin. The VOC strategy was merciless. They slaughtered indigenous communities, enslaved the remaining inhabitants, and repopulated the islands with indentured laborers. Then they imposed an absolute monopoly. Every nutmeg tree, every shipment, every single seed belonged to the company. This wasn't commerce. It was strip mining. And it propelled Amsterdam to the center of global finance. The VOC dispersed enormous dividends, drew investors from across the continent, and saw its shares traded on the planet's first formal stock exchange. This was the dawn of modern capitalism, ignited by spice and underwritten by brutality. England observed, and it emulated. The English East India Company copied the model. It overran Bengal, puppeteered local rulers, and leveraged territorial control to monopolize tea, cloth, and spices. In time, the company would cease to be a tool of the British Empire. It would become the empire's prime mover. The company printed its own money. It raised private regiments. At its height, it commanded a larger military force than the British Army itself. And it deployed those troops to guard trade lanes with the same fierce protectiveness a modern tech firm guards its intellectual property. But the epoch of nutmeg and clove yielded an unintended result. It constructed the apparatus that would later be turned on entirely different resources. And once that apparatus existed, the world didn't merely adopt it, it amplified it. By the 1700s, the spice trade had so thoroughly rearranged the globe that a new economic doctrine took hold. He who commands the commodity, commands the future. And no commodity demonstrated this more swiftly than sugar. Sugar was the first product the world craved with modern, addictive fervor, cheap energy. Quick returns, boundless demand. European consumption skyrocketed, birthing what scholars term the first mass consumer commodity. And unlike rare spices, sugar didn't thrive only on remote specks of land. It flourished across the Caribbean and the Brazilian coast. Abruptly, the axis of global affluence tilted westward. But if sugar provided the fuel, enslaved labor provided the engine. Plantations became proto-industrial complexes. The nearest equivalent the early modern era had to factories. European states battled for Caribbean islands not for glory, but for exclusive control. Jamaica, Barbados, Saint Domingue, their entire worth distilled into a single crop that could be monetized faster than anything else of the time. And from this brutal calculus, unimaginable fortunes were born. Sugar didn't merely enrich Europe, it generated an economic force field so potent that the entire Atlantic basin began to spin in its orbit. European trading families erected mansions, founded banks, and bought political office with wealth siphoned from these estates. Cities like London, Bristol, and Amsterdam swelled in size and splendor. Seaports, insurance markets, and early venture capital all sprouted from this exchange. The international financial system was being assembled, quietly, on the backbone of a product demanding huge networks, speedy transport, and massive upfront investment, the very foundations of today's markets. Here is where the Americas slide into the narrative of the first global economy in a manner few appreciate. While Eastern spices had engineered the gears of worldwide trade, New World commodities shifted it into a perpetual motion machine. Sugar for European tables. Silver from Potosi and Zacatecas for Asian treasuries. Tobacco for a continent's growing appetite. The New World ceased to be a terminus, it became a linchpin. A crucial pivot fastening Europe, Africa, and Asia into one revolving economic sphere. When Alexander Hamilton later advocated for the United States to base its financial system on robust credit, industry, and foreign commerce, he wasn't inventing a new game. He was inserting a nascent country into a pre-existing global circuit. One founded on monopolistic control, commodity currents, and corporate sovereignty patterns originating with pepper and cinnamon and maturing into something vastly intricate. And yet, beneath the shimmer of transoceanic wealth, the mechanics remained starkly simple. Every dominant force sought to remove the intermediary. Venice attempted it. Portugal attempted it. The Dutch refined it. England expanded it. And the Americas became the concluding connection in a sequence that rendered the planet mutually dependent for the very first time. But greater connection bred greater instability. Commodity prices whipsawed. Wars erupted not over creeds but over sugarcane fields and nutmeg orchards. European kingdoms drowned in debt from funding navies and offshore bastions. Corporations accrued authority that no private entity should rightfully hold. And by the late 18th century, the global economy's logic had gained a kind of sentience. Governments now danced to the tune of market vibrations, not the reverse. That transformation etched the template for contemporary capitalism, a realm where raw materials dictate the beat, where corporations draft legislation, where financial hubs tremble at news from afar, where nations vie for supply lines they do not truly command. What renders this past urgently pertinent today is not the cruelty, or the avarice, or even the scale. It is the recurring motif. In every age, the winners play the same game: control the source, the journey, and the story. If medieval Venice mastered a sea lane, today's titans master server farms. If the Dutch East India Company cornered the spice market, modern behemoths corner platforms, delivery networks, and digital real estate. The instruments have evolved. The playbook has not. And the profound paradox is that the inaugural global economy was forged not on calm, but on crisis. The more obstacles to obtaining a resource, the greater its worth became. Pepper, nutmeg, cinnamon, sugar, their ultimate power was not in their taste, it was in their grip. They granted minor states the swagger of superpowers and granted companies the prerogatives of governments. When we scrutinize our current financial landscape with its brittle supply lines, contests for critical minerals, and wars over digital domains, the echo is deafening. The world is again configured around critical passages: chip fabrication plants, maritime canals, lithium deposits, server clusters, orbital networks. And as with the spice webs of old, they are governed by a select few who comprehend that gateway equals supremacy. History never replicates, but it resonates with uncanny clarity. The first global economy demonstrated that prosperity flows to those who command the narrows. And whether the valued thing is a peppercorn or a packet of data, the law endures. Master the corridor, and you master the world. If this exploration of history changed how you see the present, please like this video and subscribe to Rich Root Official. The past holds the patterns. Let's decipher them together.